So for those of you who are new to the conference, because there's different conferences happening, I'm Arnie Roblin, soon to be president of PNWER. We have a little ceremony at lunch today. Our president, Dan Ashton, was called back to British Columbia, and so I have the distinct opportunity of getting to open today. We're going to have a little bit of an explanation a little later about today, we have two conferences going on at the same time. One is the Coastal Caucus Economic Summit, which our Coastal Caucus, who you're going to hear this morning, got going about 6 years ago. And it usually, well, it has always taken place directly on the coast. Because of the connection with my office at PNWER and this meeting at about the same time, we decided to join the two and bring a lot of our coastal representatives and people, community people, to the conference. So they will be going at the same time. Anyone from the PNWER conference that wants to go to the Coastal Caucus issues is more than welcome to do that. We have a Native American panel. We have some stuff we're joining together on invasive species because those are important, and a few other things that will be happening today. All of the Coastal Caucus meetings are going to be happening up in the, let me make sure I get this, the Mount Hood room, which is where we had our first reception if you were here at PNWER. So all day there will be conferences going on in there and explanations about different things which relate to our coast. And I hope that people can learn from our experiences over time that we've been able to help energize the economic vitality of the coast. We come out of recessions much slower in the rural areas, and so we've been trying to figure out how to do that. We've worked well with the Portland Business Bureau as well. Tonight, in honor of that, one of the big highlights of every one of our Coast Caucus is the Taste of the Oregon Coast. We're changing it to the Taste of Oregon tonight. So at the Oregon Historical Society, which is a walkable distance away from here, we will be having some of the bounty of Oregon presented to you, including the Beer Caucus from Oregon, and I think Representative DeFazio, also part of a Bear Caucus in D.C., is going to Skype in or whatever. So we would invite you to taste some of our new spirits and beer tonight, along with the shrimp and the crab from the crab commissions and the shrimp people. So great event, a wonderful thing to be a part of. Historical Museum also has a JFK exhibit going on, so if people want to look at that, they're going to be welcome to do that as well. So right now, it's my privilege to introduce an Oregonian who continues to be in one of those places which, when you look at Oregon nationally, our growth has been better than just about every place else in the country. And Washington County is one of the places that makes that happen. And so it is my distinct opportunity to ask Andy Dyke, the chairman of the Washington County Board of Commissioners, and a little bit about him. Washington County is structured as a council-manager form of government, giving the 5-member Board of Commissioners legislative responsibility and designating administrative authority to a board of appointed professional county administrator. The commissioners also serve as the governing board for Clean Water Services, a public utility providing wastewater, stormwater, and other services to nearly 500,000 customers. Chairman Andy Dyke was sworn into office in Washington County Board on January of 2011. He was elected a Washington County Commissioner in 1994 and served 16 years as a District 4 representative. Andy, come on up, and thank you for being here. Thanks, Andy.
I appreciate that. Good morning, and welcome, everyone. Welcome to the City of Roses. So as Representative Roblin said, I'm Andy Dyke. I'm the chair of the Washington County Board of Commissioners. And for those of you who are visiting the Beaver State for the first time, Washington County is Oregon's second largest county, as measured by population, with 600,000 folks living just about 10 minutes west of where we happen to sit right now. We're also proud to have many of Oregon's largest employers located in Washington County, including Intel, Corvo, Genentech, Leupold & Stevens, as well as Nike and Columbia Sportswear. So you see the diversity that we've created. It's not all just in one industry. We've been very blessed with a wealth of jobs in Washington County. And I am especially pleased to have representatives of Nike join me here this morning at our table here and being a sponsor of this PNWER conference. So thank you for being here. These great companies are among 800 manufacturing businesses currently operating in Washington County. And together they employ 1 in 4 manufacturing jobs in the state of Oregon. It's pretty impressive. It'd be nice if they were spread out throughout the whole state, but that's just not the way it works sometimes. We produce a variety of products and things for consumers throughout the PNWER region and throughout the world as well. But Washington County is also home to some of the richest and most diversified agriculture and timber industry in the state. And it employs thousands more, and we contribute more than $350 million to Oregon's economy through those industries. I grew up on a farm 25 miles west of here, and west of where we are currently, and we still produce strawberries and hay and blueberries and a variety of products. And for those who know me, we also produce kids. I have a very large family. So I guess my point is we are no longer a rural county, but we're also not an urban county. In fact, I should tell you, we used to be a coastal community, a coastal county. Got to go back a little bit to find that out. But when our provisional government mapped out the Oregon Territory in 1843, our boundaries extended north to the Olympic Peninsula and Puget Sound. But we've been landlocked for more than 160 years, and frankly, that's enough turf to keep me busy, so we'll stick with it. Today, we depend on our coastal communities for food and fiber, for parts and equipment, for a talented workforce, and for eager customers. And we're always glad to discover great places on the coast where we can explore our beautiful state and we can recreate with our family and friends. We are really joined at the hip. Whatever happens in all of our counties and regions throughout the Pacific Northwest affects Washington County and vice versa. It's very important that what we do together. So Washington County is proud to be a supporter of the Pacific Northwest Economic Region and to help sponsor the Coastal Counties Economic Summit. The support and cooperation between elected public officials, between jurisdictions, and across political boundaries has always been the standard for good governance here in Oregon. And from our smallest communities to our largest cities, from our coastal ports to our high desert ranches, and from our town hall meetings to the highest elected offices, Oregonians get more done when we work together towards mutual benefit. To illustrate what I mean, and to provide the latest news on key products and priorities for PNWER members and coastal communities, let's turn our attention now to our nation's capital for greetings from Oregon Senators Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley. I'd like to introduce them both, and so I'll begin. Senator Wyden, for the past 21 years, has served as Oregon's senior senator after serving 8 consecutive terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. Senator Wyden currently serves as the ranking Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee as well as the Budget Committee. He serves on the Energy Natural Resources Committee as well as the Select Committee on Intelligence. He and his wife Nancy have 5 children, 3 of whom are under the age of 10, so obviously he's an expert at multitasking and getting the most out of every day. The senator has spoken at PNWER conferences in the past, because these are unusual times, he's needing to spend more time than he would prefer attending to important issues in D.C. So he has offered a brief video greeting, which we'll see in just a few minutes, in which he will outline his priorities and describe his ongoing efforts on behalf of PNWER delegates and his friends from the coastal communities. And now I'd also like to introduce our other senator, Senator Jeff Merkley, who is the son of a millwright and was born in a small town in Myrtle Creek, just 3 hours south of here in Douglas County. He spent his early childhood in rural Southern Oregon. But since being elected to the U.S. Senate in 2008, Senator Merkley has also championed Oregon's rural communities, holding town halls in each of Oregon's 36 counties every year and taking the concerns and the ideas of rural Oregonians with him when he returns to Washington, D.C. Senator Merkley serves on the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Budget Committee, the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, as well as the Environment and Public Works Committee. Since 2015, he has served as the top Democrat on the Senate Appropriations Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development. So obviously, with all of these assignments, Senator Merkley can't be with us today either. So he has asked the PNWER staff to allow him this opportunity to convey his greetings to all of you this morning. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. Although I can't be with you today, I want to thank the Coastal Caucus and PNWER for organizing the 6th Annual Oregon Coastal Economic Summit. And huge congratulations to my friend Arnie on becoming president of PNWER. I know from visiting in previous years, this summit always is a terrific gathering. This year's summit is no exception, bringing together rural and urban Oregonians, folks who fish for a living, and farmers, port directors, tribal organizations, legislators, and business interests from every corner of our state. Whether you're a fishing family or part of such an organization, processing seafood, or own or work at a restaurant or hotel, each Oregon Coast resident makes an important contribution to economic development in Oregon. And I want to take just a moment to share 4 priorities I'm focused on to help the coastal economy build on its strengths. First, I know from town halls and roundtables that rural health care providers on the coast are the source of good health care and jobs. The bottom line is that this health care bill that's on offer would make health care more expensive, kick thousands of Oregonians off their coverage, give enormous tax breaks to the fortunate few, and weaken Medicare and gut Medicaid. I am fighting these plans because it could not have higher stakes for vulnerable Oregonians who count on Medicaid and middle-class folks who need to know that insurers are not going to cut off paying the bills when they have enormous expenses. I also have some healthcare ideas of my own if the Senate majority ditches the partisan our way or the highway approach. Next on my priority list is roads and bridges and infrastructure. In 2015, Congress finally passed a 5-year highway bill. I made sure the bill puts the Newburgh-Dundee bypass right near the top for the future of getting those who are coming to the coast, the tourists, getting there faster. But the bill punted on the hard questions and was paid for with funny money. That's why I proposed a plan that directly injects $1 trillion into upgrading our roads and bridges and ports and water systems. And it invests in essentials like energy and broadband to benefit the Oregon coast. Also, I have pushed for years to get money to Oregon's smaller ports, including making permanent the 10% set aside of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. The third priority is Oregon's recreation and tourism economy. The recreation and tourism economy generates an estimated $10 billion a year in direct economic impact for our state and more than 100,000 jobs. Now you know this when you live and work on the coast. And I'm working on a bill that ensures we have good policy that encourages people to get outdoors and encourages more recreation and job-creating businesses that stem from it. Fourth is fisheries. I've worked to get funding for dredging in the ports and rebuilding our jetties for safety. Folks, I don't have to tell you that funding is crucial to keeping our folks safe and to keep commerce moving. But nothing affects our coastal communities like the fishing industry. Because it's been a little tough the past couple of years for folks working in our fishing industry, I led the delegation in supporting the governor's request for a disaster declaration for the last 2 salmon seasons. Unfortunately, we've been here before. We're going to stay at it until our fishing families get the funding that they need. This coastal agenda is an ambitious one. To make it all work, we need to come together in the Congress, and we need to work in a bipartisan way. And we all know that's what Oregonians do every day. Thanks for inviting me, and I hope that next year I can be back in person. Meanwhile, we'll be having more town hall meetings soon, and I look forward to having a chance to see many of you folks at those sessions so you can educate me on what your priorities are in Washington, D.C. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm Senator Jeff Merkley. On behalf of all Oregonians, welcome to the great city of Portland for the 2017 Annual Coastal Caucus Summit that this year has been combined with the Pacific Northwest Economic Region's annual conference. The work of PNWER and the Coastal Caucus is so important to the success of coastal communities in Oregon and throughout the Northwest. So on behalf of everyone who lives in the region, thank you for the incredible job that you do. Each of you has come together today because you share a passion for our region, for our coast, for the communities and the people who live along them, and for making the Pacific Northwest an even better place for our children and our grandchildren. I certainly share that passion. Each year I hold a town hall in every county in Oregon, and the leaders and citizens of Oregon's coastal counties provide a lot of insights on the challenges and opportunities they face. I then fight in D.C. for the priorities that they have identified. I've led the fight for setting aside harbor maintenance trust funds for dredging and maintenance of small ports, which is essential for the economies of our coastal communities. I fought to keep the Coast Guard helicopter in Newport, and am pushing back forcefully against the President's proposed $1.3 billion cut to the Coast Guard budget, which would really hurt the safety of our coastal communities. I've worked to ensure increased funding in fiscal year 2017 to help protect our coastal communities from earthquake and tsunami dangers, including a substantial increase for the National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program. And I'm working hard to secure federal resources to take on sudden oak death, which threatens the environmental and economic health of our South Coast region. My team and I have also been fighting to open foreign markets for our seafood, to support the state's request for disaster assistance for salmon fishermen after a record low fall run of Chinook salmon returning to the Klamath River, and to block the President's cuts to the National Sea Grant College Program. With your guidance and partnership, I look forward to continuing to fight to address unique challenges and opportunities for coastal communities in partnership with all of you in the years to come. I wish you all a wonderful, productive, and successful summit.
Thank you very much. We have a really packed program this morning, and I'd like to say on behalf of PNWER, we're very grateful to have the Attorney General of Oregon here together with a distinguished judge from the Ninth Circuit, and we're going to have a fascinating dialogue and discussion about the role of the judiciary. So it's my really honor to invite up to the stage Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum. She's in her second term, the first woman Attorney General in Oregon. Her priorities include consumer protection, civil rights, advocating for and protecting Oregon's children, seniors, immigrants, and crime victims, and those saddled with education-related debt. She's committed to assisting district attorneys and local law enforcement in prosecuting elder abuse and complex crimes that have made crimes against children, as well as consumer internet privacy, high priorities. Attorney General Rosenblum has been very active in local and national organizations. She has served on the executive committee of the National Association of Attorneys General and is the immediate past chair of the Conference of Western Attorneys General. She's also served as the Secretary of the American Bar Association as also chair of the ABA section of state and local government law. So it's really a great honor to have Attorney General Rosenblum to make our invitation to Judge Leavy. And
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite Judge Leavy to come on up. And while he's coming up, I'm going to tell you I'm going to give his biography as quickly as I can, but we could spend the full half hour just with his biography because he has had an amazing life, and I'm just going to focus on his professional career. But why don't you come up and take a seat, Judge, and let's give him a hand even before we hear his bio. I think we're going to be sitting right in the middle over there. Okay? First of all, I just have to say it is such a special honor to have been invited to have a conversation with Judge Leavy, because as I go through his biography, I am reminded of the many ways in which he and I have just intersected in terms of our careers, starting back in Lane County in 1975 when I graduated from law school, and he was on the Lane County Circuit Court, and he was assigned to the juvenile court. And guess what? I, as a baby lawyer, was appearing before him because I was learning how to try cases by taking juvenile court appointments. And I was so appreciative of the kindness of this wonderful man and also the brilliance of this amazing judge. So what a great mentor I have had ever since. And so I had to start out with that personal note because it's not about me this morning, it's about him. But it's just such a delight and such an honor to be able to be here with you, Judge. And so let me quickly run through your background and then we'll get down to the conversation. Senior Circuit Judge Edward Leavy of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals was appointed to the Ninth Circuit in March of 1987, and he assumed senior status in May of 1997. So he's already been a senior judge for 20 years. He served as judge on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. You've all heard of FISA, right? He served on that court and as its presiding judge. From 2001 to 2008, he was on that court and presiding from 2005 to 2008. We could probably spend all day, if we could get him to talk about that, talking just about that little snippet of his career. Prior to his appointment to the federal appellate bench, he served as a trial judge on the district court for the District of Oregon from 1984 to 87. So he was elevated fairly quickly there. And as a magistrate judge from 1976 to 1984. He's managed to serve as a justice pro tem on the Supreme Court of Oregon, as a judge, as I mentioned, on the Oregon Circuit Court in Lane County from 1961 to 76. And as a judge, we used to have district and circuit courts in the state courts. He was a district court judge, as was I. Not at the same time, from 57 to 61. He did have a legal career before he was a judge, believe it or not. He did. He was a deputy DA in Lane County from 1954 to 1957. And he also was in private practice in Eugene. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Portland in 1950 and his law degree from Notre Dame Law School in 1953. So just could go on and on. I'm going to start out and I'm going to go sit with him, but I want to make sure that he also tells you a little bit about his family and how he grew up in the hops industry here in Oregon. And I understand that I know his family well. His daughter-in-law is actually a staff attorney at the Oregon Court of Appeals, Jean Ann Quinn, and we worked together when I was on the court there. So I've managed to infiltrate the family in lots of different ways. And I understand that they're getting into hazelnuts in addition to hops. So with that, I will join the judge.
Whenever a person receives praise like that, if they're a lawyer accustomed to the adversary system, the response could be, you don't have to prove it, I'll admit it. So thank you very much for that kind introduction. I want to be sure that you are all hearing us. So if anybody is not hearing us, I want you to call it to our attention immediately. I want to observe right now that I recall the occasion that the Attorney General speaks about when she first appeared before me in the Lane County Juvenile Court. I remember the occasion. I don't remember the details of the case, but my impression of her at that time leads me not to be surprised at all by the accomplishments that she has achieved during the course of her professional career. Very proud of her and proud of my identification with her along the way.
Thank you, Judge. Now we're going to ask you some questions. See, judges like to ask the questions, right? So we're going to kind of put him in the hot seat here for just a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind just telling the folks here how your family did get into this business and a little bit about your growing up.
Okay. I am the 10th child born to an immigrant father and a second-generation mother. My mother went, I think, to about the 8th grade. I regard her as one of the geniuses in my life. My father was 23 years older than she, and they were married in 1907 and began to acquire the land that is now the Leavy farm in 1912. And 9 of us grew to be adults on that, and I was the first one and only one to go beyond high school. And I am the sole survivor now. So I've witnessed a good measure of sadness and tragedy. I am old enough to remember the Depression. I was born in 1929. By the time I became aware, my family was already raising hops and had done so since about 1923. That farm is still in our family, being operated by our son, who has done it for 40 years now. He was going to go into partnership with my brother and raise some hops, but my brother died suddenly, and our son started running the farm, raising hops, when he was 23 years old, and has done so successfully since then. Now, a little bit about me. I can remember when we did not have electricity in our home. I can remember the first tractor that came to our farm. And I can tell you that as a teenager, if you're assigned the task of storing loose straw in a barn with a tin roof, it'll make you want to be a lawyer.
And the rest is history. But the family farm remains, and it is still being run by your son.
It's still being run by our son, Patrick. My father's name was Patrick. And he is raising quite a few organic hops. Now, when you think of people consuming alcohol, I guess that's one form of poison. You might be surprised that they would want to avoid the other kinds of poison, but that's the way it's supposed to work.
Great. So let's move on to your legal career. You were, for a time, an elected judge in Lane County, right?
Yes.
I don't think I've ever asked you if you had a contested election.
Well, I became a district judge in 1957 at age 27, and I was in that position for 4 years until I ran against an incumbent circuit judge in Lane County, and had no money. My contemporaries had no money, and no knowledge of really how to run for office. So I started going to various meetings, and I would, political meetings, and I would find that I was meeting the same people. Politicians have a way of assembling repeatedly. And so I decided to knock on doors. And during the course of the primary and the general election, I knocked on 3,000 doors. And I had enough help that we knocked on 12,000 doors in Lane County, which was 25% of the households in the whole county. And I was elected unseating a controversial incumbent. And I learned some valuable lessons in knocking on doors. First of all, a judge does not make enemies by ruling. That's what a judge hires out to do. And that I have carried with me, that as far as the public is concerned, I'm not concerned about the public's reaction. That'll take care of itself. People expect to be heard, and they expect a court to rule. And I think most people would observe that my rulings are decisive. You can't leave people in uncertainty. That's the worst thing I think that a trial lawyer can cope with, is uncertainty. The other thing is that I learned that a judge by no means should take on any controversial cause. And it doesn't matter whether that cause is good or bad. The public or a litigant doesn't want to have to worry about how the outcome of his or her case fits into the judge's problem. They don't want to know about the judge's causes or problems. So those were very valuable lessons, in addition to a major lesson that you can't hide in a county courthouse what happens. The public is more aware than we give the public credit for being.
I'm so glad I asked that question, because I did not know that you had had a contested race. But I think having had that background in politics, albeit judicial politics, really set the stage then for your appointment to the federal court, which of course is not supposed to be political, right? And you have certainly demonstrated over the course of your career that you have treated it that way. That said, others perhaps have a little bit of a different view. As a federal judge, can you talk to us about the various courts that you've served on and how you have been able to maintain that role that you just described?
Well, first of all, I was appointed, you understand now, I started in the state court in a traffic and small claims court. And I was a judge of that court for 4 years. Then I started as a federal judge, as a magistrate judge, which is at the lowest level in the federal system. The appointment of magistrates is done by the district judges. And the district judges decide who they want to appoint as a magistrate judge. Now, a magistrate judge not being appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate is not what we call an Article III judge. An Article III judge is one who is appointed under Article III of the U.S. Constitution. That's by the president and with the advice and consent of the Senate. And then after serving 8 years there was a vacancy in the district court. And I lacked partisan political connections. And my chances of being appointed in that context were somewhat remote. But as it turned out, just fortuitously, Edith Green and Wendell Wyatt were both acquaintances of mine. They were on a selection committee in 1980 that decided who to recommend for appointment by President Jimmy Carter. And they became acquainted with me during that. And they prevailed on Senator Hatfield to allow my appointment by President Reagan in 1983. Now, that is purely fortuitous. I don't see how anybody can manage the path to the federal judiciary. It just seems like if a person announces their ambition to be a federal judge, there are a whole host of people out there ready to try to shoot him or her down. And so It's a matter of being at the right place at the right time. And then to the Court of Appeals, the fact is that Senator Hatfield wanted to appoint Malcolm Marsh, and he told me, to the district court when I was first appointed to the district court. And when there became a vacancy on the Ninth Circuit to be filled by a judge from Oregon, Senator Hatfield wanted a vacancy on the district court. And my elevation to the Court of Appeals is no more profound than that. That's just the way it happened. And so you can pretend like you're a great master of judicial politics, but it don't work that way. Fortunately or unfortunately. And let me just add, now, for you who are maybe not aware, for the appointment of a district judge, that is the trial court judge for, let's say, the District of Oregon, that is largely up to the senators. And if a senator is of the same party as the president, those senators decide. The president really doesn't much care who's a trial judge in Oregon. But at the Court of Appeals, the partisanship is noticeably different. And there is more attention paid to the political credentials for appointment to the Court of Appeals. It's rare that a president would appoint to the Court of Appeals a member of the opposition party.
Stay tuned on that, right? Judge, you, I think after you were a senior judge, received the appointment to the FISA court. Can you talk about that for a few minutes? Are you allowed to say anything about it, even admit you were on it, let alone the presiding judge? Tell us what you can in brief.
Well, first of all, when I was asked if I would serve on the Court of Review, I have to confess that I had never heard of the court. And it isn't like it has been in recent years where there's so much discussion about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, because it's dealing with wiretaps, and there is a public aversion to the whole idea of telephone wires being tapped. It just seems like something that collectively we are against. So it's controversial just to talk about it. Now, having said that, I accepted the appointment, and then I learned that the court had never heard a case. The Court of Review, that is, because all the work is done by the Court of Original Jurisdiction, and they have hundreds of applications per year. But since the target of the wiretap is not aware that there's any proceeding going on to tap his or her wire, in case of the grant of an order for a wiretap, there is no appeal because there's no aggrieved party that knows that they're aggrieved. And it's only in the case of denials then that there is a party, the government, to appeal to the Court of Review. Well, I wasn't on the court very long until we got one. And it was right after 9/11, and it involved an issue of whether or not those engaged in wiretapping, that is the CIA or the FBI members, could confer with lawyers in the criminal division about the legality of what they were doing or what the Justice Department might want them to do by way of investigation. And the idea was that this was for foreign intelligence purposes, not for law enforcement purposes. So the lower court had prohibited that discussion, the so-called wall that we heard about after 9/11. And our case involved that issue, whether or not the trial court was correct in prohibiting that. And we held that the trial court was not correct. There was no statutory or constitutional reason why they couldn't confer. And So what we did is we put that material, the facts of the case that we knew were classified, in one paragraph. And then we wrote the rest of the opinion in such a way that it did not include any classified material, and it got published in the law books. In re Seal case is the name of the case, and it's published in the law books. And I think over the years it has withstood criticism pretty well. I still think we were right, in other words.
And you set the stage, because I think we have another Oregon judge who's currently serving on the FISA court. Is that correct?
Judge Mossman from the District of Oregon is on the FISA court. That's a very demanding thing. There are 11 judges of that court. They have to take turns, and they have to be in turn in Washington, D.C. for a full week, because that's where the court functions. And we have one of our Ninth Circuit colleagues on the Court of Review, Judge Tallman from Seattle.
Now, the Ninth Circuit is a bit controversial.
To say the least.
And it would probably take all day to go into detail there, but I am wondering if you have any comment on what seems to pop up fairly regularly and seems to be back recently, the idea of splitting the Ninth Circuit.
Yes, that comes and goes, and in the 30 years that I've been on the court, that's always been an issue. And usually what happens is, and I say this with some criticism, maybe some respect, whatever the case is, Congress passes a law. Then when it comes time to enforce it, it comes through the courts, and then it becomes in the political interest of the senators to blame the court for shutting down logging in Oregon, right? We didn't pass the law on endangered species. All we did was enforce the law. Or we get some other controversial case, and somebody in the political branches gets excited about that. And so what can you do with this court that you think is so evil? Well, the attack on it is either to deny it additional judges, which is the easy thing for Congress to do, for the Senate particularly to do, or threaten to split it. Now, the irony of it is that the decisions that have caused the most political furor over the years have been written by judges who are not identified as liberals, but we get accused of being liberal. Now, one of the cases that got national attention, and you can talk about this any place in the country and it'll immediately ring a bell, and that is the Ninth Circuit Court decision that said that the words "under God," as prescribed in the Pledge of Allegiance, if required by the government of the state of California through its education department to be recited in the schools, is contrary to the anti-establishment clause for religion. Now, that decision was written by a Nixon appointee, Ted Goodwin, former Justice of the Supreme Court of Oregon, former U.S. District Judge, and now Senior Judge of the Court of Appeals, longtime Oregonian. Well, it's the liberal judges from California who are blamed for all of that, see? And the other one that got a lot of attention was the ability of a native village to tax somebody in Alaska, and that one got a lot of attention. So the net effect, I think that's where the discussion of split comes from. It comes from the disappointment or the political needs of the members of Congress. Now, the problem with splitting it is nobody knows how to split it. if you were to apply some rule of judicial administration that says that a court of a certain size should be split, what are you going to do with California? Once you put it in any circuit, that circuit is too big from a standpoint of the numbers of cases. The Ninth Circuit has more than 50 million people living in the Ninth Circuit. We hear cases in Pasadena, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Honolulu, and Anchorage. And we include Montana, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, Oregon, Washington, California, Alaska, Hawaii, and the Northern Mariana Islands, and Guam. So what are we going to do? Now, bear in mind, there is no circuit in the country that does not have more than one state in that circuit. Now, if you put one state in a circuit, that means you have only 2 senators who are going to be riding herd on who's appointed to that court. And you talk about political swings, you're going to have it if you're limited to 2. Now, one of the virtues of the Ninth Circuit, with 9 states in it, we have 18 senators who are concerned about who gets to be appointed to the Ninth Circuit. And I think that has a leveling effect.
Thank you, Judge. There are so many other topics that I was hoping we could cover, but I do know that we need to get on to the next group, the panel, which is going to be wonderful. But I do want to just mention, since you and I talked about this when we had lunch last week, that it's not on his resume, but Judge Leavy is truly one of the great mediators in our country, and he has been called upon regularly and continues to be called upon to. One of the wonderful things about federal judges is they often hold themselves out as willing to take the tough cases to help mediate. Obviously, they're not the trial judge, I don't think, on those cases. But just as an example, Judge Leavy mediated the Wen-Ho Lee case. He mediated the Capital Consultants case, for those of you who are well, many people are familiar with those, and many others. If we had time, he was going to regale you with stories about these cases and his role as a mediator. Is there one point you could make real quickly about maybe for these folks here who are in the business world for the most part, that might be something you could send them home with?
Well, I think we've got to do something about the expense of litigation, and it is crushing. And I had an attorney from Pendleton who told me that unless there was $100,000 at issue, it wasn't economical to hire him as a lawyer. Now, that's why this mediation thing has kind of caught on in the last 25 years. And maybe we're not trying enough cases, really. But given the expense, it's difficult to really advocate that. We are losing, whether we realize it or not, we're losing the jury trial. And that is tragic. We've got to do something to make the jury trial less expensive. Now, just as a personal thing, I can tell you that I have never been more proud to be a lawyer than to see what can happen in negotiation. And the one that comes to mind, if we got a minute, is the Capital Consultants case. That was the Wiederhorn and Grayson case. Many of you here from Oregon will recall that case. There were 5 law firm defendants. There were 3 accounting firm defendants. Every lawyer who served as an in-house counsel for any of the trusts was a defendant. And we had 20-some cases filed in the District Court of Oregon. And that's when it was referred to me for mediation. We had 100 lawyers involved in representing somebody in all of that. And the trusts that were involved went as far east as Ohio, as I recall. So it was a big thing. We had lawyers from all across the country involved in that. And that case, all of it, was settled. And it was settled without a single deposition being taken. The attorney's fees for the plaintiffs were less than 9%. And the individuals whose money was was the subject of the fraud, recovered 70-some cents on the dollar. Now, that was all so complicated that I felt that any one lawyer who wanted to mess it up and keep this litigation going for 10 years could have done it. But it didn't happen, and I thought it spoke well for the profession.
And it speaks very well for the judge.
Never more proud to be a lawyer than as a result of that. I've had a lot of fascinating experiences. North American Free Trade Agreement, did a mediation in Texas involving displaced workers in Texas who under the law were entitled to retraining. And the irony of it was that a lot of those were Hispanic U.S. persons who lost their job because of the North American Free Trade Agreement, lost their job to industries that moved to Mexico. Irony, but we got it settled.
As you can see, we could go on, and I think we would all be in rapt attention throughout the day, but we're going to have to conclude. I want to thank Judge Leavy for being with us this morning and just for being such a wonderful, charismatic human being and a great, great judge. Let's give him a hand.
So again, the Coastal Caucus members can come on taking the stage. We're going to have a brief exchange of people. I want to thank Judge Leavy and our Attorney General Rosenblum for being here and taking part of this. We found in our Coastal Caucus summits, some people said, you've got the legislative branch, you've got the executive branch, where's the judiciary? And so for the last number of times, we've been very fortunate to have people come and be a part of our conference to talk about that third branch of government in our country. Thank you very much for being here. So one of the other things that has happened over the time with our Coastal Caucus, and you're going to get to understand who we are and what we're doing in the next couple of minutes, because we're just going to go around and talk about how we have been effectively using a bipartisan, bicameral organization in our legislature made up of members who have coastal representation to move things forward and to do things for our local areas. The charter communication has been a part of that from the very beginning to get messages out, and they were yesterday here interviewing people, and we're going to have Dana Crowley come on up, and she's going to interview us on stage so you get to know a little bit more about who and what the Coastal Caucus are. So, Dana? Dana?
Sorry. Thank you. I'll just say hello, and then I'll sit right down. Thank you. And does everyone On behalf of Charter Communications, I wish to sincerely thank all of you, those who have traveled far, those who will be watching on video to empower yourself with this information, and those who are trying to make a difference. I realize that we have much to talk about, so I won't waste any more time with introductions and thank yous, but let's begin with Arnie. And Arnie Roebland, your senator from Oregon, who was the originator of the Oregon Coastal Caucus, along with his assistant Rosie, who's done so much. Please explain to us exactly what that is and how it works.
So just so people really have a good understanding, the Coastal Caucus existed long before I got to the legislature, but the Coastal Caucus Economic Summit started 6 years ago, and we hold it on the coast. We hold it at our tribal establishments that are on the coast. In my district, there are 4 of the 9 tribes of Oregon. They have been great hosts to us. We recognized early on that when it comes to place, tribes really care about that, and they are part of the economic drivers in our areas, and so they hosted our event. And what they said is, we're going to give you the space, we're going to pay for your meals, bring all the people, the local officials from up and down the coast to our place and have your conference and talk about the issues that make a difference, and bring state and federal officials to the coast to have a conversation with them. That's the origin of what our economic summit has been. It's grown to 300 or 400 people a year. Our federal delegation tends to get there and talk to us, as well as all of our state agencies and stuff. And so you're going to see that today up in the Mount Hood room, we're going to do what we usually do on the coast as a summit because we were connected here. And we thought we want to share with all of these local people ways in which they can do similar kinds of things to help the economic vitality of their area. So that's who we are. That's what the Coastal Caucus Economic Summit is. Again, this is the 6th annual one. And we've had a lot of support from Portland and the Portland Business Bureau to help us do things. They wanted to talk to us about making rural economic development a part of what they're doing. Our tribes have been immensely important to us in making sure that voices get heard. In fact, this morning you will see a panel of our tribes having a conversation about economic development in the area as well. So a big, important part of that. So thank you.
And we'll just proceed right down the road. Next, we have Representative Caddy McEwen, and you had a successful time in the legislature making sure that we had a transportation package that was passed. It's getting busier in Portland, tougher to get around, tougher for tourists like me to get out to the coast and to the other recreational areas, and tougher to move all of our products. And how will this package make a difference for us, please?
Oh, well, thank you. And I just want to welcome everybody to this beautiful city, into Oregon, and on behalf of the Coastal Caucus, hopefully you have a chance to go to the coast while you're here as well. I represent House District 9, which is down on the south coast, and I was privileged in this session to have the speaker put me in the position of co-chairing the Joint Committee on Transportation, Preservation, and Modernization. This was about a 2-year effort. Actually, you could call it a 4-year effort. In trying to bring a comprehensive transportation package to the state of Oregon. We traveled the state for a number of months, listened to our citizens in small towns, rural, urban, east, west, north, south, and heard the same message all across the state, which was we have issues with congestion in Portland that are impacting our economy no matter where we live. We have a tremendous interest in making investments in transit, whether it's urban and rural. The basis of a package, of course, is the preservation of the system, the maintenance of the system that our parents and grandparents invested in, and we've heard that message in other areas of this conference this week. It's our generation's turn to make sure that we're passing this off to our children in good stead. We haven't done a very good job of preserving the system, just the basic transportation system, our roads, streets, bridges, and culverts. And we also have a great interest in this state in bike and pedestrian and highway safety. So what we did when we went together to put this package together is address those issues. And we had kind of an eye towards everybody having skin in the game. If you use the system, you need to help pay for the system. So we came together with a comprehensive package that passed the last week of the session. It's an excess of a $5 billion package that addresses bottlenecks in the Portland area, significant investment in large congestion projects. It has an interesting way. It's a small 0.1% employee tax, which is very innovative, to invest a significant amount of money in transit across the state for the first time. And we have an innovative way to impose a standard gas tax, but a registration and title fee that's tiered to begin to address the issue of decreasing gas tax because of the efficiency of vehicles that we see moving forward into the future. So we did some innovative things in this package. But at the end of the day, our cities and counties and our state highway system are going to be invested in preservation and maintenance. We're going to address those connections between rural and urban communities with transit investment, getting people to work, taking care of those folks that choose to drive or do no longer drive because they're elderly or don't have the ability to have a car. We're investing in the bike and pedestrian and transit infrastructure and highway safety. We're investing $20 million a year in safe routes to schools and taking care of those connectors in Oregon where we know we're having accidents and we're having some problems with highway safety. So those are the things that we went after. I was delighted to have a bipartisan vote on this bill. Many stakeholders at the table, around the table, to make sure that all issues were dealt with. We have an investment in electric vehicle rebates, which is going to help us make that transition in our metro area, particularly for those folks who care deeply about what happens with air quality. So we had a lot of ideas. We were successful in pulling them all together in a strong package, and it was a wild ride, but we were successful. So thank you for all of those in the room who were helping us pull on that oar. It took a while.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, and that was quite an accomplishment. So thank you for that. Next, we have our Representative David Gomberg, and for those who aren't familiar, he's going to give us more information about the maritime workforce and his efforts there.
I am indeed. Is this on? Coming through? There. I am indeed. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here today. You know, first a little bit of background on a remarkable legislative session, if I may, because I think we began with really very unique challenges. We began in February with a great deal of uncertainty from the national government. Can I just say we were dealing with a fair amount of uncertainty on what was going to be happening in Washington, D.C. We were starting with a nearly $2 billion deficit here in Oregon. And in the Oregon House, we were starting with nearly a quarter of the members being brand new, freshman members in the Oregon House. Those of you familiar with government and the legislative process understand how that makes our situation unique. And I might also add that I think that we were not necessarily beginning with a shared vision in both the Senate and the House on how we were to move forward. And in the face of those kinds of challenges, we passed a generational transportation package. We increased our spending for K through 12 education to $8.2 billion. Not enough, but still a historic commitment to our schools. We were able to keep 250,000 Oregonians on the Oregon Health Plan. We passed the strongest equal pay for equal work legislation in the country, and we were able to fully fund our commitment to Oregon veterans, an accomplishment that Senator Johnson, who's not with us this morning, but she and I take some very personal pleasure in. And at the coast, we had great successes as well, whether it was successes for our ports or successes for the Oregon Coast Trail. But I wanted to touch very briefly on the Marine Industry Task Force, because, you know, across Oregon, we recognize industries. We've got an agriculture industry. We've got a wine industry. We've got a high-tech industry. But do we have a coastal marine industry? The answer is, most often we have a group of businesses. We have businesses that operate fishing or ship repairs or construction or aquaculture or shellfish. We have all these different industries, but we don't have, or at least not until now, have not had a recognized formal industry on the coast. And I think that passing legislation to initiate a task force and begin to work as an industry rather than as a distinct and separated group of local businesses is going to give us the tools we need to move forward and strengthen our local economy in a growing and resilient marine industry. And it really does look to the future of our Oregon coast economy rather than looking back over our shoulder. A significant accomplishment this last legislative session.
Congratulations. And now on to our Senator from Roseburg, Jeff Cruz. You mentioned that we made some great accomplishments with education, and could you please elaborate for us?
Well, thank you, Dana. First, as chair of the Coastal Caucus, one of my jobs is correct Arnie's mistakes and other things like that. So this is the 6th year of the summit. That's true, Arnie. But the Oregon Coastal Caucus has existed for decades. And the interesting part about it is it's been a strong voice in the Oregon legislature. Other groups have tried to form and have been incredibly unsuccessful in doing so. My favorite one is the Multnomah County Caucus, which is, of course, half the state. So that didn't work very well, did it? Okay. Another thing I need to do, Annie, stand up, please. That's Annie Montgomery. She has been the heart and soul of the Coastal Caucus for a year now. And we have been blessed over the course of time to have Sea Grant sponsor a position to be on top of our agenda. And Annie has just been an absolute jewel. So thank you for your hard work, Annie. I had to do that because she's a lawyer and her husband's a lawyer, and I didn't want to get sued. The interesting part about the $2 billion shortfall, and somehow we were able to fill it without new taxes, I find that interesting. One of the things we learn in the legislature is we deal with things called economic voodoo. And numbers can be created and uncreated in numerous ways. But I don't want to talk about that at this point in time. What I want to talk about is something that Senator Rosenblum and I have been working on, two specific issues. Since we have gone to annual sessions, and the short one is next February, it's 35 days, and in theory, it's supposed to be for technical fixes, but in reality, we have had, over the course of time, some rather major issues come before the short session. There have been a lot of complaints about that, but in some cases it makes a lot of sense, because once you have been through a long session and an interim and had work groups and really fleshed out some things, it can make some sense that we do those things. And so what we've been working on, that it affects the coast, affects all Oregon, is trying to get a structure in our education system that actually makes sense and serves education. Some of us are very tired of education being the political football that it's been over time. And so we are working on a proposal to create a true K-20 Board of Education. That's one of the things we're working on. And we're getting closer as time goes to coming up with a concept that we think will work. Another thing we are working on is we know that if kids are ready when they start school, that they do better. One of the things we do a really poor job on, and it's kind of hit and miss, is the appropriate preschool screenings for things like autism and dyslexia and things like that, because if you can identify those issues with those kids on the front end, their pathway becomes very smooth, or certainly a lot smoother. And so I've been working with Oregon Pediatric Society and some other folks, and we think we've got a plan that's going to get us there. Another thing we are looking at this point in time is the bureaucratic structure. The Oregon Department of Education requires of schools and teachers 174 different data sets. Okay? It's ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous. We want to get it back. The whole concept is that teachers become teachers to teach, not be data entry clerks. So these are some of the things that I think impact everybody that we have been working on, that we will be bringing to the short session in 18, that I think, we say it's all about the kids. Sometimes it needs to be.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Representative David Brock-Smith. In our conversations yesterday, he brought to my attention something he's been working on for quite a while, and it's his concern about sudden oak death syndrome. And in our conversations yesterday, you shared with me that you're slightly concerned this isn't being taken seriously enough.
Thank you, Dana, and good morning, all. I'm Representative David Brock-Smith, Southwest Oregon, Curry, Coos, Douglas, Josephine counties. And before I get started, I appreciated our Attorney General's conversation this morning. We have another statewide elected here today, and that is our own Secretary of State, Dennis Richardson. So I appreciate you being here, Secretary. When it goes, and I also appreciate our introduction from our Washington County Chair, and you really hit the nail on the head when it comes to collaboration. And we're all in this together. Washington County, second largest county in the state, is affected by what happens in Curry County. And that collaboration is something that the Coastal Caucus does very well. You have 2 Republicans on the Coastal Caucus and 5 Democrats, but we're able to get things done. And I've found in my first term in the legislature that working together and bipartisanship is the way we move things forward with the state. And as you heard our Senator Jeff Merkley speak about this morning in his opening address, you heard him speak about sudden oak death. And Jeff and I are co-convening a task force for sudden oak death in Southwest Oregon, which just isn't confined there, but is also a serious problem and will potentially be a serious problem statewide with the economic impacts in the billions. And I'm happy that folks like Senator Frederick understand that from the this area of the state. and Senator Dimbro, who is in the back, and Senator Monroe, because as we move forward to eradicate this devastating disease, because we have a European strain, the only place in Oregon where it is in Curry County, that went from 2 infected sites in 15 to 30 in 16, and it is aggressive and it affects Douglas fir. And we already have a decimated timber industry in Southwest Oregon. Our natural resource industries are hanging by a thread. And this quarantine expansion into the Coos County market could have serious impacts to the Port of Coos Bay and its ability to expand in its exports and imports. So that's one of the challenges, but it's also one of the collaborative efforts that we're working on in the Coastal Caucus, and I appreciate my colleagues from the North Coast to my district in understanding and moving forward. And then lastly, I want to talk about collaboration with regards to one of the successful bills that I had the pleasure of working on, and that was a very comprehensive multi-unit housing bill that is probably one of the most, has the widest range of impact in the state with regards to multifamily housing. And it allows incentives for our counties and cities for up to 120% of average median income. I really appreciate working with Representative Marsh. We stayed late many times, and I would come and say, what do you think about this? And she'd go, well, I don't know, I would do it this way. So Representative Marsh, of course, is from Ashland, and it's those type of collaborative efforts that really get it done. And so, Washington County Chair, I really appreciate your comments this morning.
Thank you very much. And next we have Representative Deborah Boone, who hails from the beautiful Cannon Beach area, and she's here to share with us some of her research on seismic activity and emergency preparedness. Thank you.
And that can apply to all of us. In this area, you've all heard of the Cascadia earthquake event and accompanying tsunami, which will likely be worse in the South Coast area, so you're going to get more times more. Exactly. Anyway, it's something I've been working on for the whole time I've been here. I serve on the Oregon Seismic Safety Policy Advisory Council again after 9 years. I took a brief break to go to Department of Homeland Security, the State Homeland Security Council, and ended up trading with my chair in Emergency Prep and Veterans Affairs for a seat back on OSPAC. And I was privileged to have the help of everybody up here and many more to develop the Oregon Resilience Plan. And as we've gone through since 2011, we've implemented a few bills each year, or each session, and this year our big champion was the City of Portland and getting the seismic work done that they did, and Representative Barbara Smith Warner helped in that capacity too, thank you. And my interest in Veterans Affairs is I never served. I'm the only person on the committee who's not a veteran, and I've been on it pretty much my whole time in the legislature. And neither of my kids served, but I feel a great obligation to my country and to my state to do all I can for veterans. And I'm sure there are a lot of veterans in the room right now, and thank you for your service. Another area that I've been working on the whole time I've been there is energy, and most particularly renewable energy. And that ties in with the seismic, or it's not seismic, but the event, the Cascadia event, because when we have that event, those of us on the west side of things are going to be without our grid, and we will not have transmission that way. So it makes sense to me to have our transmission of power come from the ocean, and that's wave and tidal and offshore wind. And that's something that I know it's expensive, but I've been in that sector for a long time, mostly wave and tidal, and there are some exciting new developments there. And Oregon has at least 2 companies that I know of who are developing devices that we have actually tested. One at Camp Rylea, it's an underwater device, and we do have, for the good piece of news here, we do have some options, and if we can keep going on that track, we will have some opportunities to get powered back up again, get our buildings. That's we talked last night about, or yesterday, with some engineers about reciprocity and comedy and engineering among the states and Canada in our PNWER region. So there are a lot of opportunities there, and I have to say the last one, and it's not just my bill. Everybody, I think we had a complete unanimous sign-on on this bill, and it's the volunteer firefighters tax checkoff. It was our 9th attempt, and we got it this time. So any of you who serve as volunteer firefighters, thank you very much for what you do, and now we have a way to thank you further. So with that, I'll hand back the tape, or the mic.
All right, thank you very much, Deborah, and thank you all for coming to be here and speak with us. On behalf of Charter Local Edition Northwest, we thank you for being with us.